Hello.
Hello.
Bit of a different video for everyone today. We are going to be installing some extra solar on old Schnitty here. We're going to be transforming this into this and this into this. After driving, been on the road for about 6 months now and gone all around the place and everything, we've come to realize that we don't have enough solar and that our batteries are dying too quick basically. When we're off grid, we normally get about 2 weeks and then it's just a constant decline. The sun hasn't really been enough to the solar we've got hasn't been enough to be charging the batteries up enough during the day, so they're slowly getting flatter and flatter and flatter, and then we've had a couple of times where we've woken up in the morning and they're dead.
It's not been fun.
So this video is going to be a bit more of a talking about solar panels, what type of panels you should get,
how many you need,
how much wattage on the roof you need in relation to your batteries. I'm just going to go through a few, of the nerdier and geekier stuff when it comes to electricity.
the sparky things.
Being an electrician, I sort of understand what I'm doing.
Sort of.
But yeah, so we're going to go through a bit of that stuff. Try and give you guys a bit of a everything you need to know if you're doing your own solar installation. You want to upgrade your own solar array on your van, bus, whatever. So yeah, we're going to start off installing some panels.
Yeah, how good?
Actually no, we're going to start off by going through everything to do with panels. So I'm going to talk to you about different wattages, different amperages, controllers, sizes, all that jazz. So let's get into it. Alright, so as you can see, we've got two different types of panels down here. We've got these smaller ones, which are actually flexi boys, and these are good for putting on the roof of the bus. We're going to be putting this one or these two up the front on the roof, because obviously the roof is curved, so these will wrap around and fit the shape of the roof. And obviously you've got this big dog here. Now that's going to end up being the same as these two we got up here, except it's going to be over the aircon, so it's going to be higher. So we've had to fabricate some brackets and whatnot to get it up there. So basically, when it comes to installing solar, you want to take into account how much battery power you already have. So when we built the bus originally, it was sort of back in the days when solar and battery systems and all that sort of stuff was around, but it was also not huge. Everyone's got vans now with massive solar systems and massive battery systems and all that sort of stuff. So we got at the moment 740 watts of solar on the roof and 1,000 amp hours of batteries in the back of the bus. So a general rule of thumb that they've sort of come up with now is that however much amp hours of battery you have, you want to double that in solar. So technically we should have 2,000 watts of solar for our 1,000 amp hours of batteries. Obviously at the time we didn't do it because I was new. I'd never done solar before. I was new to building all these battery systems and all this sort of stuff, and at first it was fine. We basically went 6 months without having any dramas with batteries depleting too quickly or anything like that, mainly because we were in like WA up north. The sun is strong, you're getting a lot of sunlight hours during the day, so you're getting that time to recharge whatever you're using. But then as we've gone south, started heading over east, shorter days, the sun's not as strong down here, and of course we're spending more time off grid in the bus, which is obviously using heaps more power throughout the day. So even once I put these panels on, those two little panels are only 100 watts each, so that system will be 200 extra watts, and then that big boy is 440 watts. So that's a pretty big panel, probably one of the biggest panels you could chuck on a van or a car or whatever. So even with all that together, plus what we've got up on the roof, we're still not going to hit that 2000 watt mark, which, you know, you can only really do what you got. If we really had to, we could replace those 2 panels up there with 440 watters, and then that would up us a little bit more, but for the sake of an extra, what is it, 40 or 50 watts or something, it's not really worth the money. So we're just going to go with that for now. So if you're new to solar panels and all this sort of stuff, you'll hear everyone talking about watts. You know, you've got 440 watt panel, you've got a 100 watt panel, series, parallel, all this sort of stuff, like, and it gets real confusing real quick. One of the biggest myths when it comes to RV or caravan panels is that you have to have a solar panel that matches the voltage of your batteries. So if you've got a 12 volt battery setup or a 24 volt battery setup, you have to get 12 volt panels or 24 volt panels. That is a fallacy. If you look on the back here, this is your data sheet for the panel, and it'll tell you its wattage rating, its voltage rating, its amperage rating, all this sort of stuff. So this is a 100 watt panel, and we can see that its maximum voltage it can put out is 21.2 volts. So when this panel is working at 100%, which will never happen because the instant these are put in the sun, they start to degrade, and chances of you getting it exactly in the right spot with the sun directly over it at the perfect angle, perfect temperature, perfect everything, it's just never going to happen. But say for example that was perfect operating conditions, that would put out 21.6 volts. So that's where your chargers come in. So these obviously hook into your solar panel, and this converts whatever voltage is coming out of the panel down to the voltage that you are putting into your batteries. So that's why if anyone ever says to you, oh, you've got a caravan, you need a 12 volt panel, they don't know what they're talking about. At the end of the day, the way these things work is when you link them all up, either your voltage goes up or your current goes up. So you could have whatever this is rated to. This could be rated to 1000 volts, for example, and you could have all these panels in a row pumping out 1000 volts, and this will convert it down to 12 volt. But back to wattages. So you hear people talking about linking up panels in series and parallel and all this sort of stuff, and it gets confusing and everything like that. So what we're going to do with these 2 smaller panels is link them in parallel. So when you think of, it's kind of hard to explain, there's a bit of math behind it. So power equals voltage times current. So in this case, power is wattage. Wattage is just a measurement of power. So we're just going to use easy numbers here because I'm not great at math. So we're going to say this is a 100 watt panel. Let's just say the maximum voltage that this panel can put out is 10 volts. So that means if this panel was working at 100% performance and is putting out 10 volts, and you know you've got 100 watts, you divide 100 watts divided by 10 volts, and what do they give you? That'll give you 10 amps. So that's how much amperage is coming out of, going to be coming out of the panel when it's flat out. So when you put panels in parallel, you join all the neutrals together, all the positives together, and that runs back to your charger. So when you're in parallel, the voltage will stay the same and the current will fluctuate up and down. So if you put 200 watt panels together in parallel, you will get, say, 10 volts. Each panel is putting out 10 volts, but it stays at 10 volts, but you'll get 20 amps to equal 200 watts because you have 200 watt panels next to each other. Whereas if you put them in series, so you run, you join these 2 panels, you join the negative of one to the positive of the other, and then you run from the negative of that panel and the positive of that panel back to your charger. That's called series. The voltage will change, but the current will stay the same. So to get your 200 watts, the current will be 10 amps still, but 20 volts. Make sense? Now that we've talked sort of about how wattage is determined and currents and voltage and all that sort of stuff, why should you go parallel, or why should you go series if you are joining panels together? So basically, if your amperage is going up, you need to use a bigger cable, whereas if your voltage is going up, you don't. So if you're using actual solar cable, which we'll be using, that's rated to 1000 volts. And then I think, depending on what size you get, you can either get 4mm or 6mm cable. I got 6mm because that's good for about 60 amps on a good day. So if you want to keep your cable size down, it's better to run in series. However, if you put your panels in series together, what happens is, if one panel, for whatever reason, you know, gives up, dies, breaks, that's the whole, both panels won't work anymore, because each panel creates the circuit, and if you cut off one panel, there's no circuit anymore, so therefore you'll lose the whole array. If you've got 10 panels in a row lined up in series and one panel dies, that whole array becomes basically useless. It's not doing anything anymore. So we've decided to run these panels in parallel because our cable is going to be big enough to run the amperage that's going to be coming off it, and then that way also, if one panel dies, we'll still be getting power out of the other panel. But with these bigger panels, obviously that's running all on its own. It's just going to be a single panel going straight to its own Mppt solar controller, and that's how we're going to do that. So we're going to be putting in 2 Mppts, one for the 200 watt panels and one for the 440 watt panel. Alright, so when it comes to mounting your solar panels, obviously there's a heap of different ways you can do it, you know. Make up brackets, screw them to the roof. In the case of these flexible ones, they're going to get stuck straight to the roof. Originally I thought the panel itself, you just, you know, put heaps of silicone or whatever on the back of it and just slap it straight down. But when I bought these, the bloke at the RV solar store said to me, these days what they do is they give you these little kits, and it's like a little leg that gets stuck to the underneath of the panel. And then what this does is it gives some air underneath the panel, so it helps it breathe, keeps it nice and cool, stops the panel from putting the heat from the panel into your vehicle, which can, you know, damage your paint, all that sort of stuff. So what you do basically is you just stick these to the bottom of the panel with some very high bond tape, and then you can also use that tape onto your vehicle or your van or whatever afterwards. But because we have the heat reflecting paint on top of the bus, it's not a smooth surface, so we're going to put tape on these onto the panel, and then we're going to use very high bond silicone on the underside of this to stick it to the roof of the bus, just because it's like bumpy and bubbly because of the way the paint texture is, so that way it'll give us a better adhesion than what it would if we were just trying to stick this tape straight to it. So yeah, we're going to get these all stuck up and then we'll get them on the roof.
A few moments later.
Alrighty, there we go. All of our little spacer strips are on. I think I've decided though what I'm going to do as well is just run a bead of silicone along each side of them, just because I'm a bit worried. I don't really trust the tape, to be honest. So we'll run a bead of silicone on the inside of all of them as well, just for a bit of extra strength, and then we should be able to chuck them on the roof. Alrighty, so our panels are ready to go now. We've given this a wash with just some car wash and water to get all the dirt off, and now we're just going to give it a wipe over with some methylated spirits just to get all the grime and grease off. Got our center line, so one panel's going to go here, one panel's going to go there. So yeah, we'll get this up here. If you are going to be siliconing your panels to the roof, make sure that you use a high strength structural silicon and not just an ordinary roof and gutter or ceiling silicon. This will ensure that the bond is strong enough to hold the panels on the roof when you're traveling down the freeway at 100 k's an hour. And then once you've finished siliconing, make sure you use something to hold the panels to the roof so that it can set and hold it in place. And this is how we're going to leave it. This is how it attaches to the bus. Alrighty, so when we left you guys the other day, we were siliconing these bad boys down onto the roof. They're obviously all done now. So I was just going to give you guys a bit of a glimpse as to what goes on with the wiring and how we've run that along the roof to keep it on the roof, because we've had to run basically the wires from here all the way back on top of the roof because we didn't want to drill holes and try and get it through the inside of the bus, because it'd probably be pretty much impossible. So for starters, you can see that we've wired it in parallel. So as we were talking about earlier, series in parallel, so you have to get these two connecting blocks down here. That's how you join them into parallel. So you join the negative from this panel and the negative from this panel into this joining block, and then the joining block goes through the wire back out to the controller. Same with the positives. And also you can see here I had to make a little extension lead because for some reason the positive leads coming out of these panels were really short and the negatives were a lot longer, so I didn't have to make a joiner for those. So when it comes to the connections on these, they have an MC4 connection, which is polarity sensitive, so it has a connection for the negative and a connection for the positive. All you got to do really is just look at the connector and it should have a plus or a minus sign for negative or positive. But the positives are always like a male end, so they go into the negative, and then the negatives are a female end. And then to tie or stick all our cables to the roof, pretty much we just used the same silicon that we used on the panels. If you can see, just put a couple of dobs, stick it down to it, hold it down with something until it's dry, and yeah. And then we've just done that pretty much all the way along to the back of the bus, and I'll go show you where it goes down into the roof. Alrighty, so if you can see, obviously our cables run all the way along there. We've cable tied them up onto the supports for this one to get them up there, and then they just run all the way down into a little box here, which is your little, that's where we had to drill a hole in the roof. The Shelby in the background. So yeah, that's where you drill a hole in the roof, feed your cables through there. These are all waterproof glands. So they actually come with special rubbers that go on the side these, so the cable goes through a separate hole, and then you do that up tight obviously, and then just silicone it down again and hope that no water comes in. Alrighty, so obviously after you've done your panels and your wiring, it's time to hook up your controllers. So these little bad boys are probably, you know, the most important part about the whole setup. So we've got two different ones. This little one is going to run the two panels on the front, and then the big dog is going to run the big dog panel. So basically when it comes to controllers, you know, there's heaps of different brands. We've gone with Victron. I actually do have an Enerdrive controller in there as well, which I'll show you and talk to you guys about later as well. But we've gone with Victron. They're just good. All their gear is nice and small and compact. You can get an app on your phone. They all talk, all the controllers and stuff talk to each other with Bluetooth, so they all, you know, integrate with each other and basically just work together. Because I've noticed with these ones, when the batteries are charging, because you can look at it all on your phone, you can see what each controller and stuff's doing. It'll be like directly in the sun, but they'll actually spread the load out from each controller, so that way you're not just getting one controller that's just gone full ham and then the other ones are doing nothing. It actually will talk, they'll talk to each other, and you know, each controller will be putting out 100 watts rather than one controller putting out 400 and the other 3 doing nothing. But yeah, so when it comes to controllers, you need to make sure that your controllers will be compatible with your panels. So we were talking earlier about the little card on the back of the panels, how it's got, you know, voltages and currents and all that sort of stuff that it will put out. So you need to check. So those front panels were 24 volts, I think they were putting out if they're at maximum capacity. So you just need to check that these controllers are within that operating range, that they will be able to run at that voltage. All the specs for these will have a maximum wattage they can do. It'll tell you how much current they will put out if they're, you know, at maximum, and then you can go and get all your cables and fuses and all that sort of stuff to suit, to make sure that you're running everything optimally. You don't want to have, you know, a cable that's too small and your fuse is too small, and then your panels end up blowing the fuses because they're putting out too much power. But yeah, we'll show you inside and show you sort of how they're wired up, and then also talk to you about the Enerdrive, the difference between the Enerdrive and the Victron controllers as well. Welcome to the back of the bus, which is basically our powerhouse for everything. If you can see behind me, there's an inverter, a couple of solar charge, that's the original solar chargers up there, and then this is the new setup that I have just installed. So when you're installing all this stuff, you need to make sure that you have these bad boys, which are your isolators coming from the panel. So basically they are there for 2 reasons. One, so you can isolate this supply if you have to, because you want to work on the system or anything, and then also they're a protective device for the cable. So this one's rated at 25 amps and then the other one's rated at 40 amps. So if for whatever reason the panels spaz out and start sending ridiculous amounts of current down, these will trip out and stop them from frying, you know, all your other componentry and that. Even though these come with their own internal protection, it's just you know, something that's good to do and have there. You know, I'm pretty sure it's legal, you're meant to have those there as well. So first things first, when you hook up your panels and, you know, connect them all up and everything, you just want to check and make sure that your polarity is correct. When I did the original install on the first panels, I don't know how, but somehow I reversed the polarity, and it was yeah, I had the, even though it was a red and a black, I had the red going into the positive and it was actually the negative. So easiest way to do that is you just get your multimeter here, and you just obviously set it to your DC volts, and your meter should be polarity sensitive. So you've got a red and a black cable or lead or whatever. So you just obviously put your prongs into your positive and your negative, and there that's coming up as 22.5 volts. So if I switch these two around, so I put the red into the black and the black into the red, just like that. See there, it comes up with a negative, so that means your polarity is wrong if that comes up like that. But we're all good, these are all plugged in, happy days, and currently you can see we're on, saying that we're on float voltage, so we're fully charged, which is mint. But yeah, when it comes to installing all this stuff, it's pretty basic. You know, battery, PV for solar, positive, negative, negative, positive. Like, it's pretty straightforward. You know, it's not too hard to wire in. And then this obviously runs from here back to our batteries, and it's all fused and everything at the batteries as well. So yeah, you just got to make sure that you're running the correct size cables for what this is going to be doing. So when you check your specs on how much current and stuff these put out, they obviously this is a maximum of 30 amps will be coming out of this. So you just got to make sure the cable going from here back to your batteries is rated to over 30 amps, and then obviously your fuse is also the right spec as well. So this cable we got is just standard solar cable, and that's rated for like 70 amps. It's 6 mil cable, so that's way big enough for what we need. The only other thing that you have to be conscious of is volt drop. So if you're doing long runs with your cable, the resistance of the cable will eventually cause volt drop, which I don't want to get into too much. It's pretty hard to explain, but basically the longer you run means the higher resistance of cable, which makes it harder for the electricity to get to where it needs to go. So the best way to describe it is voltage is the like the oomph behind the electricity, and current is the flow. So what will happen is, if you are trying to draw 30 amps off this charger, say, and your cable's too small, then what will happen is it'll start to struggle and your current will go up and your voltage will go down, which isn't a big deal if you're doing big stuff like 230 volts and 415 volts and stuff like that. But if you're using small voltages like 12 volts or 24 volts, you know, 1 volt of volt drop is enough to stop stuff from working. So there is a lot of volt drop charts and stuff on Google. Definitely go check them out so you can figure out how far your run's going to be, how much volt drop is going to be, and then you can upsize your cable to suit, and then that's also going to mean you have a higher current rating as well. So it's definitely something to think about when you're running all this sort of stuff. All right, well, hopefully all of that isn't blowing your mind, because it's blowing my mind trying to explain it to you. But now I'm just going to show you, obviously that's our Enerdrive charger as well. Just I don't want to be biased, because we're not, you know, trying to sell you Victron stuff, and we're not sponsored by them or nothing like that. But yeah, so we've got this Enerdrive unit as well. This is our DC to DC charger, which actually comes off the alternator for the bus, so it'll charge the batteries while the bus is running. But it also has a solar input, so we've just got a little Anderson plug on the back of the bus that we plug our solar blanket into, just for a bit of extra, you know, oomph if you need it. We have been using it quite a fair bit when obviously the batteries were going flat. We had the solar blanket out all day, every day as well. But so what I've found with that unit is it doesn't, well, for starters, it doesn't have Bluetooth or anything, so you can't hook it up to your phone and see what's going on with it. But the other thing I've found with using it is it will say the batteries are full when my Victron stuff will keep charging them. So I don't know, because obviously they set certain values of what's charged, what's not charged, what's absorption, what's bulk, all that sort of stuff. So I don't know if their values in those are set to lower than the Victron ones are. But it's still a good bit of gear, still works. You know, we're charging 50 amps off the alternator when the bus is running and that. So I definitely wouldn't discount them, but yeah, just do a bit of research into them and pick what you guys reckon is good for your setup. There is heaps of different brands out there, like your iTech World, Victron, Enerdrive, you know, and then heaps of brands in between. So definitely do a bit of research and see what is going to suit your system the best. Well, there we go.
Well.
Shelby's just like, yay, solar, it's working. So yeah, that's pretty much start to finish how to install. Hopefully you've got something, you know, learn something out of it if you're installing or putting more gear on your van and that. Mainly the main things to take away from, you know, the highlighted points, I would say, is obviously every system's different. Before you go buying stuff and installing stuff, figure out how much power you're going to be using for your batteries. Every system is going to be different, so every setup is going to be different, you know, when it comes to space, what you can fit, where you can fit it, how much wattage you're going to need, what type of voltages you're going to need. So yeah, definitely do a bit of research, check it all out. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all my brain can cope with for now. So yeah, hope you've learned something, and stick around for the next one.
Bye.